Hi, this is John Linneball from John Linneball Tutoring, and this is APUS History Video number 46, The Fighting Over Slavery Stops Temporarily, and Some Issues for Debate. And if you like this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and share and subscribe to my channel. And you can also check out my channel at, well, not my channel, whatever, my page at testpreparation.locals.com. All right, let's get going. The fighting over slavery stops temporarily. Now, slavery was the most divisive issue in the first half of the 1800s. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was a settlement involving new territories that were being added to the United States. As more territories were added, this truce broke down. The creation of the Missouri Compromise. Now, remember from the previous videos or your school or wherever, there was the era of good feelings. That was from 1816 to 1825. Despite the name and general characterization of this era, there actually was significant tension caused by sectional differences, including slavery. Slavery was generally avoided by politicians, but it was discussed in 1820. Missouri was added as a slave state in 1818. Since there were already 11 slave and 11 free states, the addition of Missouri would mean there were more slave than free states. So as a compromise, Maine was added as a free state to maintain the balance. All right, so we went from the show me state to the Stephen King state to balance that out, and Stephen King and lobsters and all sorts of other things. All right, let's move on. Details of the Missouri Compromise. So, the Missouri Compromise divided the remaining Louisiana Territory at 36 degrees and 30 minutes north latitude. That line was the border between the slave and free states. Any territory or state north of the line, except for Missouri, was free. Anything south of that was a slave state or slave territory. The territories in the West became the focus of the slavery debate as white American settlers moved into those territories. Now, in case you're wondering about that on the map, this Crittenden's Compromise, we see the Missouri Compromise line, so that's pretty easy to understand. Crittenden's, boy, I wish I could say that. Anyway, Crittenden's Compromise was an attempt to permanently protect slavery in 1860. It failed, so we can take a look at the Wikipedia article about that. So let's do that really quickly here. Okay, so we're going to look at the Crittenden, wow, Compromise. All right, so basically he was a senator. John Crittenden was a senator who proposed 6 constitutional amendments and 4 congressional resolutions. The idea is once you amend the Constitution and add something to it, it can't be changed except by another amendment repealing it. It can't be found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court because it's actually part of the Constitution. Same problem with if you try to do something legislatively to it. That's too bad. It's in the Constitution, which means you have to use the amendment procedure. You can't just pass a law against it or to repeal it. So, anyway, so it guaranteed the permanent existence of slavery in the slave states and addressed the Southern demands to fugitive slaves in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So, it did a few things, and it proposed reinstating the Missouri Compromise, which had been functionally repealed by the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and struck down entirely by the 1857 Dred Scott decision, and extending the compromise to the West. So it was a failed attempt to do something to save slavery and basically keep the Union together. Of course, it failed, leading to the Civil War. So let's get back to our show here. All right. John Quincy Adams. Let's talk about John Quincy Adams. Most presidents really don't do very much once they've left office. I mean, it's a pretty huge job. It's kind of the pinnacle, is what I'm trying to say, the pinnacle of someone's achievements. Anyway, so once these presidents have been the president, they figure it's time to pack it in, retire, do some nice things. So, for example, George W. Bush, he does some paintings and things like that. That's nice. But good old J.Q. Adams kept working in politics. He was the only former president to serve in the House of Representatives. And he vocally opposed slavery. So he worked pretty hard. He worked on some controversial things there. Kind of like Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter has been, of course, very active with Habitat of Humanity. And William Howard Taft became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court after he was president. So a few of these presidents keep themselves pretty busy doing things, whether it's in politics or like Jimmy Carter, where he's just doing really nice things for a nonprofit and just generally being a pretty awesome human being. No matter what you thought of him as president, if you're old enough to remember him being president, as I am, pretty cool guy. So now we have, of course, the former president Donald Trump, who's complaining about the election and planning for the 2024 election. Some people think he'll be reelected. Other people think he'll end up in prison. You decide. All right, let's move on. The annexation of Texas and slavery. I don't mean that slavery was annexed along with Texas. Anyway, many Texans wanted the Lone Star Republic to join the U.S. In fact, Texas sent a delegation to Washington, D.C. to discuss Texas's admission to the Union. However, Andrew Jackson didn't want to cause problems by admitting a large slave state, so he refused the deal. Presidents Van Buren, Harrison, and Tyler also basically just ducked the issue because they didn't want to get involved either. They just figured this is going to be a huge mess. We don't have to do it, so we're not going to do it. And notice that President Harrison was president for, I think, about a month or something. He got sick during his inaugural address and got a cold and then basically died from it, if I recall correctly. So that's why he was only in office in 1841. Let's move on. 1844, election and annexation of Texas. The 1844 election emphasized the idea that Texas should be annexed, that is, added to the United States. Democratic presidential candidate James K. Polk promised the annexation of Texas if he were elected, as well as a resolution of the border disputes between the U.S. and Great Britain involving Oregon. You can take a look at video 43 in this series to learn more about that, and I'll put a link up here. Southern and Northern voters would both gain from this plan. The Southern voters, of course, they get Texas. The Northern voters, hey, they get Oregon. The Democrats supported expansion and slavery more than the Whigs. Polk won the election, but the outgoing President Tyler finished Texas's annexation before Polk could even take office, basically to show, hey, that's the will of the people, and look, I did this awesome thing, even though I was a lame duck on his way out. So, take it for what it is. Texas was added as the 15th slave state in 1844. The annexation of Texas was an issue reverberating after the Mexican-American War, and which helped set the tone for U.S. political disputes of the 1850s. Conflicts in the West. In the 1800s, many people left the East to go, the East and the South and the Midwest and the North, etc., to all go west, like Horace Greeley said, "Go west, young man." Some people sought free soil, hey, I want some elbow room, I want to be able to start a nice place to farm and have my own little ranch, whatever, something like that. And, so they wanted to have farming in the free state, free state kind of way, basically so there'd be no slavery in the West. Other people wanted to start Southern-style plantation farming, slavery, etc. Other people were Mormons who settled in Utah. They believed it was a good place to go, especially after the disaster at Nauvoo in Illinois and other places where Mormons found they were not so welcome. But the Utes in Utah did seem to enjoy having them there, or at least were willing to tolerate them there. So, not making fun of Mormons, but that's what happened. And finally, you had people who sought gold in California. The 49ers, that's where the football team name comes from, is people who came around 1849 or so. And you probably know the story of Sutter's Creek, where they originally discovered the gold that would lead to the 1849 gold rush. Okay, let's move on. So, let's review a little bit. Discussion and exam prep. The era of good feelings. Many people, historians, point out class conflicts, such as the traditional apprentice master labor arrangement was replaced with industrial labor, and of course slavery. Andrew Jackson, was he a champion of the common man and woman? Was he just a racist boor, or was he both? Why should you care? Well, because the AP exam loves to ask questions about Jackson. He was unpopular in the 1800s. Most of the historians of this period were people who were from New England, and they were not big Jackson fans. They were very elitist. And so they could easily point out, hey, how about that Trail of Tears, huh? Hey, ask the Indians, the Native Americans, ask them how they liked that Indian removal. That wasn't so good. He was seen as dictatorial because, well, he was. And so today, actually, people want to replace the $20 bill that has Jackson on there with a new one that has Harriet Tubman, the freed slave and great worker, and, somebody who was really good in the abolitionist and civil rights movement. So, but then what happened after that is, well, Donald Trump kind of put the kibosh on that, and we still have Andy Jackson on the $20 bill. But let's talk about the slide that's actually in front of us right here. Jackson, he was an advocate of the common man. He certainly was. Later historians respected Jackson's sincerity, ideas of equality, and the link to the common person and the frontier. Now, these ideas come from the ideas of Frederick Jackson Turner. Frederick Jackson Turner was somebody who really liked the idea of the frontier, where people could find resources and develop things and develop their own life and develop a good character. And it became popular, in the early 1900s, just when the real frontier was disappearing. So people developed that nostalgia for it. And boy, isn't it great how people did all these things. So we can take a look at Frederick Jackson Turner's Wikipedia article. And all right. And here it is. So we look at that and we see Frederick Jackson Turner. You can go find this on Wikipedia. So it talks about he was an American historian in the early 20th century, so roughly 100 years ago, and went to University of Wisconsin and Harvard University. And he was mostly famous for his frontier thesis, where he said that, the frontier thesis was that the American democracy was formed by the frontier, the moving frontier line, and the pioneers going through the process and developing these new territories, etc. So, if you need to see this, go look at it. Probably should. It'll help you learn a little bit about history. Never hurts you to learn a little bit more than just what you need to get a good grade on the AP exam, and it also makes sure that you will actually do well on the AP exam. All right, now, what I remember about Jackson's inauguration was a picture I'm sure I saw in history class about 30 years ago, which is really more like 35 years ago. Okay, I'm old, but anyway. There's this huge cheese. It's this gigantic cheese. Look, this cheese, that's what this is. It's a cheese with human beings around it, with big knives cutting out huge things of this cheese. And there's a little boy eating some of the cheese. All right. So this was a gigantic inauguration party. It was very democratic, like capital D, Democratic Party. This also led to the spoil system. So basically, soon as Jackson was elected, he kicked out officials that he didn't like and put in people who he did. So that's the spoil system. This would later be replaced with the civil service system. And we can talk about that along there. But basically, the civil service system keeps people in their jobs, and they can't just get kicked out because a new administration got put in. And distrust of the Bank of the United States, big banking in general, and he favored hard money specie rather than paper money. And again, you can look at video 35 for that. So one of the ironies is that they put Jackson on the $20 bill, if we recall. So it's kind of funny. Guy who hated paper money is on paper money in the United States. Now, we can look again at Jackson's recent image as authoritarian. We can see the Trail of Tears occurred despite the Supreme Court's ruling in Worcester versus Georgia that favored the rights of Native Americans. So we can look at our web pages here, and So if we look at this, okay, there was Worcester versus Georgia that gave the Cherokee some actual rights, and that's that people couldn't go and seize Cherokee lands where gold was found, etc. So in this decision, Jackson kind of was, the myth, the story of it is basically that Jackson said, John Marshall has made his decision, let him enforce it. Although the comment is probably apocryphal, basically it means it's a story that probably didn't happen. It's a myth. That George and Jackson, they really did ignore it. That's not apocryphal. It really happened. So basically, great. He just ignored an important Supreme Court precedent because, hey, he didn't want to. So that is pretty darn authoritarian if you ask me. And you can learn more about Let Him Enforce It from this link here that is in the PowerPoint that I'm showing, and here we go. Now Let Him Enforce It, the long history of the imperial presidency. So, and of course, former President Trump was very, very popular. Well, he found it very popular. He was very fond, I should say, of using authoritarianism. Oh, there's a problem. There's an emergency. You have to give me more power. You don't listen to what Congress says or what the Supreme Court says. You have to do what I say because you need to be protected by me because I'm the only one who can protect you and I know more than you. So there are a lot of presidents who have done that along the years, but the most recent one and one of the most egregious examples is former President Donald Trump. So anyway, let's go on and do a little bit more with the PowerPoint presentation I'm doing here. All right, so historians from the 1960s until the present looked at Jackson's wars and analogized them to Vietnam, to Iraq. Basically, they were kind of authoritarian, basically maybe not the greatest at actually representing what the United States should do, but hey, you had presidents and people who said, well, if he says we should do it, we're going to do it. So historians have looked at a lot of things like the War of 1812 and analogized it to wars from Vietnam to Iraq. And you can also look at video 35 for this here. Replacing Jackson on the $20 bill. Well, because of Jackson's problematic image, as I said before, authoritarian, racist against Native Americans to the point of near genocide, the Trail of Tears, Jackson's image on the $20 bill is ironic, I should say, as he hated paper money, and the proposed replacement again was Harriet Tubman, who was a former slave and abolitionist. So, we can look at this article from the New York Times, and you can see, okay, so back in 2016 even, Harriet Tubman, ousts Andrew Jackson in change for a $20 bill. Get it? Change? Ha ha ha. Like they're changing the kind of bill, the image that's on the bill, so that's the different from change for a 20 where they give you a 10 and 2 5s. Ha ha ha. Anyway, so it's great. And notice they were going to put a woman on the face of the $10 bill, but because Hamilton was such a popular play, they decided not to do that. Anyway, so we will look back on some other things here. Getting back to what we're doing. Oh. All right. This proposal was put on hold by Trump's Treasury Department in 2017. Social and political history. Social historians since the 1970s have focused on the common man and common woman, such as workers, Indians, I don't mean people from India, I mean Native Americans, slaves, women, frontier families, etc. These people all replaced the politicians, etc., who are studied by political historians. Social historians study documents such as diaries, letters, census documents, and court records, rather than just laws, speeches, treaties, etc., that are studied by political historians. So a combination of social and political historians give us a fuller picture of what was going on in any particular historical period. So you should be prepared to discuss both political and social history when you take the AP US History exam. You want to know the social groups as well as the political figures and movements. They interact with each other in important ways. I mean, everybody has to live together, so social movements affect political movements and vice versa. In fact, a lot of times it's hard to really show a clear line setting those things apart, a line of demarcation, if you will. Let's move on. Doesn't want to move. Okay, here we go. All right, reform movements. So remember the reform movements that are mentioned in video 37? Okay, antebellum, not antebellum, that's awesome. Antebellum reform movements were often liberating and egalitarian, that means concerned with equality, such as women's rights, the abolition of slavery. All right, the abolition of slavery. But they were also often rigidly conservative. So take the temperance movement. Well, that was, no, you're bad if you drink alcohol. Well, not really. People who can handle alcohol should be able to drink alcohol if they want. People who are alcoholics or otherwise just can't handle their alcohol, maybe they shouldn't, but it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. And there are religious revivals such as the Second Great Awakening, so you should make sure you know about those and know about those aspects of it. So, for example, remember, the biggest organization, or at least one of the most popular, one of the most well-known, was the Women's Christian Temperance Union. And there's a reason it was called the Women's, because they didn't want men to be part of it, because they thought, well, men are brutes and they drink and they can't be trusted to be sober, and they certainly can't be trusted with this kind of a reform movement. So there is that. They were often a mix of both progressive and conservative values, which makes sense. A lot of movements today are also, kind of progressive, but kind of conservative. So, as I just said, the Women's Christian Temperance movement, and it supported women doing things for themselves, but they were also very religious, very conservative about alcohol, as I just said. Public education, kind of the same thing. It was really progressive in that, hey, people are getting free education. It was conservative in that it emphasized middle-class Protestant values. Remember, for example, in Massachusetts, the reason they wanted everyone to be able to read is so they could read the Bible and so they could be Puritans. So that's pretty conservative, even if it seems, wow, that's so liberal that they want people to be well-informed. Well, yes, but it's mostly because of this religious thing. It's a matter of perspective, I guess, this other thing. We're talking about manifest density. Not manifest density, it's manifest destiny. For those of you who haven't seen Back to the Future, that's one of the things the guy keeps saying, "You are my density," when he's trying to say, "You are my destiny." But anyway, all right, a matter of perspective. Manifest destiny, or crass imperialism. Most U.S. history textbooks describe the U.S.'s Western expansion in very rosy, very cheery terms, such as this inevitable development of the U.S. or manifest destiny. So remember the elbow room schoolhouse rock video that's in video 45. You can also just go look that up. Just type in elbow room schoolhouse rock on YouTube and you'll find it. So, this even expanded to Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Hawaii. So we can look at this, a trifle embarrassed, my exhibit. Okay, so if we look at this, it's a little thing here. Here's a editorial cartoon that basically says, well, gee, look at this. There's these kids that have been left outside, and it talks about, Cuba and the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Hawaii, that, oh, look at these other things that were left here. So if you want to find that, that is over here. Here's a website, Manifest Destiny TT Weebly, a trifle embarrassed. So, talks about Puerto Rico, Cuba, Hawaii, and the they have Philippine anyway. Whatever, this was written a long time ago in 1898. So that's where Manifest Destiny was kind of expanded beyond where people might say, well, okay, I get maybe the whole continent should be one country, or at least, the northern and southern borders, fine. So most of this should be one country, but, these are islands, that are not on this. Why are they part of it? Also, maybe it's a little joke like embarazada, means pregnant. Doesn't mean embarrassed in Spanish, but, most of these are Spanish-speaking countries, so maybe it's like a little pun. I don't know. Anyway, the same textbooks would harshly criticize as expansion. That is, they would say, oh, well, this so-called expansion was really imperialism and colonialism by other powers. So, for example, in World War II, the Nazis and the Japanese, they conquered other powers. They were basically just trying to create, 19th century, that is the 1800s style empires in the 20th century, and that's why they were seen as, oh, they're these horrible aggressors. But usually when we see American textbook writers and editors describing the expansion by the United States, basically using the same tactics, which is conquest, it's a manifest destiny. To be fair, many school boards, especially larger ones like Texas, where everybody in the state has the same textbooks, probably not going to approve something that describes the United States as anything but all uniformly wonderful in whatever it did in history. So you end up with a double standard like this that should be avoided. But you took the initiative to actually watch this video, so you don't have to just be sucked in by, biased reports. I'll stop short of calling it propaganda, but it's biased. All right. Did you find this video useful? If you did, hey, why don't you subscribe to my channel? And please click that like button. Neither one of those actions costs you anything, and you'll be alerted about my new videos. Why? Well, it's really simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers, which I actually do have, so thanks to everybody who helped me with that, and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. Still nowhere near that 4,000 hours, so please, please, please watch this, watch the other videos. For gosh sake, share this with all your friends, tell everybody how wonderful it is, watch it. And this ad money will help me make more videos. This actually takes a considerable amount of time for me to research this and make the PowerPoint and record this, so please help me help you. If you saw an ad during this video, please know I have not received any of the ad money from this, and I won't until I have the subscribers and the view time that YouTube demands. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share these links, etc. And by the way, just going back to this whole ad money thing, it's funny because I just kind of knew that no matter what YouTube said, they were going to put ads on these things, even if I wasn't officially monetized. And then they kind of made it official later when I read, oh, okay, because of course they are. Not blaming YouTube, they're providing me a huge service at no cost to me, but still, if you want me to get some of the money, subscribe, like, share. Excellent. I gladly read and subscribe. Read and subscribe, not silly me. Okay, I gladly read and respond to constructive criticism. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't talk today. Anyway, I gladly read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos. I reserve the right to delete comments such as troll posts or spam, so don't bother. And hey, you can hire me for tutoring if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area. Or even if you're not, we can probably meet in person. If you're outside the Bay Area, we can do it when I'm traveling. And of course, we can always do it through the internet. That's the lovely, lovely, lovely internet helping us out, helping us communicate from large distances, etc. And after that, I'd like to thank you for watching. There is a little bit more after this if you really want to watch it, so why not? Go ahead. Contact me. Facebook, Instagram, email, phone. Okay, Facebook, just go to facebook.com/Linneval Tutoring, all one word. Instagram, go to www.instagram.com/John.Linneval.tutoring. Phone number, 415-623-4251. That's my cell phone. You can call me. You can text me. Do whatever you want. Email, john@johnlinneval.com. Website, it's johnlinneval.com or johnlinnevaltutoring.com. Doesn't matter which one you pick, takes you to the same site. And testpreparation.locals.com. I need to update that a little bit, but I got most of the same videos there as I do here, so you might like it a little better there. And lbry.tv, that's another place where you can find these videos. And if you actually want to mail me something, actual postal mail, it's John Linneval Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. And finally, please, please, please know this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on Barron's AP US History Review Book, the 4th edition. I know there's a 5th edition. I've used a little bit, but right now I'm using the 4th edition. And any other sources listed in the video description, so those Wikipedia links and other links that I've shown you here, they're listed here. You can look at them. While this should help you do well on the AP History exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and what the teacher asks you about on his, her, or non-binaries, tests, homework, etc. So please, please, please read your class texts and pay attention to what the teacher is telling you in class, because I can't be responsible for that. All right, that's the end of the show. Hope you had a good time. Have a good day, night, whatever time it is. Bye.